Okay. Interview with Mr. John Lewis Dutko on 1 March 2002 at the Culver Road Armory in Rochester, New York. Interviewer is Lieutenant Colonel Robert Von Hassel, and videographer is Mr. Wayne Clark. Mr. Dutko, tell me, where and when were you born?
I was born in Weirton, West Virginia,
And when was that?
July 27th, 1922.
Is that where you grew up?
We lived there for 5 years. Then we moved to East Rochester, New York.
Okay. Why did you move to East Rochester?
My dad's work. The work was slow in West Virginia, so we moved to East Rochester.
So you basically grew up in Rochester.
Yes.
And when did you enter the Navy?
November 2nd, 1942.
Were you in high school at the time?
No, I was working.
What were you doing?
I was working in a paper mill.
Why the Navy?
Why the Navy? Well, I thought it would be a better life than the foxholes.
Okay, so tell me, in November of 1942, when you entered the Navy, where did you go first?
We went to Newport, Rhode Island. That's where I had my training.
Okay, and from there?
From there, I went to Boston, Massachusetts, waiting for assignment.
Okay.
While I was waiting for assignments, they had a NURG. They needed men in the armed guard. We were the gunners on merchant ships. So we were called down to the conference room, and at that time it was a volunteer service because it was a dangerous assignment. So they just wanted volunteers. So I volunteered for that.
And how soon after that did you ship out on a merchantman?
Probably a couple weeks.
Which one was it? Which was your first ship?
Oh, gee. I got it on the...
This is the SS Penelope.
Penelope Barker.
Okay.
Yes. Yes.
What were your duties aboard the Barker?
We manned the guns.
Which did you have a particular gun that you manned?
I was the first ship I was on a 20 millimeter.
And later on, were you on other types of guns?
Yes, 3-inch 50, 5-inch 38, 5-inch 51. We had different duties on different ships.
Mm-hmm. And were you a gun pointer, a gun layer, loader?
Well, on the 20 millimeters, I was a gunner. And on the 5-inch 50, I was the gun captain.
Did you ever have occasion to fire these guns in combat?
Yes.
Tell us about that.
Well, we were always subject to submarines. And our duty was to secure the ship. We had the safety of the ship, and the civilians run the ships, the merchant seamen. We were the Navy gunners.
Right.
And we were the first ships into port where they needed us. We carried ammunition, tanks, all kinds of equipment, and food supplies. We delivered the cargoes.
Were any of the ships you were on attacked?
Yes.
Can you tell us about that?
Well, on the John Brown in Italy, we were under fire constantly, going through the Mediterranean Sea into Naples. We were fired upon daily.
Now, that name is somewhat familiar to me. Is something significant about that ship?
Yes, the John Brown is a museum. It's the only Liberty ship on the East Coast that is still in service.
Have you ever visited her since the war?
Yeah, it was in Buffalo 2 years ago.
How did that feel, being back aboard your old ship?
Real good, real good.
Well, tell me about it. What did you feel when you walked on?
Just brought back old memories.
Did you bring family with you, or did you
No,
go by yourself?
well, we had 12 guys that we have a little club like that were in the armed guard service, and we kind of took the people on tours of the ship.
Well, what were some of the things that you told the people that you took on
Well,
tour?
how the guns operated, how the watch was. We stood watch, just normal, everyday life aboard the ship. And what I've got pictures aboard the museum aboard the ship, so I was kind of proud of that. It's a museum, and it's anchored in Baltimore now.
Mhm.
It made a trip over to Normandy, I think 2 or 3 years ago.
And while you were aboard the John Brown in the Mediterranean, were you basically under air attack, or was it submarine attack?
It was mostly air attack in the Mediterranean, but we were at the Anzio beachhead when it was under fire. We made the southern France invasion. We were one of the first ships in that. And my first trip was to the Persian Gulf in 1942. So we were in Basra, Iraq at that time. And then I made a trip to Murmansk, Russia, which was one of the worst trips we ever made. Submarines and aircraft, we were under fire all the time. But our ships were always, I don't know how many were sunk in the merchant marine.
Well, what is it like when you're under attack? What were you thinking?
Well, we were young kids, 20 years old. We just did our job, went to the guns, did what we were supposed to do. Probably didn't know any better. It was a good life. We traveled a lot. I saw a lot of the world. Saw a lot of the different ports. We had liberty in all the ports, so we could spend a week or two in all the ports that we went to.
Well, that must have been very interesting. I mean, coming from upstate New York.
That's what I say. We had a chance to see the world.
Any particular port of calls that you remember most?
Well, Bombay, India, Hobart, Tasmania, Iraq.
Any one of them stand out in your mind the most? One you enjoyed the most?
Not really. Murmansk, Russia was different. Seeing how these people lived up there in the cold and what their life was like.
Did you ever watch, you were in convoy most of the time.
What's that?
You were in convoys most of the time.
Most of the time.
Other ships would get hit in the convoy.
Yes, we had ships sunk in our convoy.
You would see this?
At a distance, yes.
Did you ever wonder if you were going to be next?
Well, you never knew. We lived day to day.
Did that change the way you lived or the way you looked at things?
I don't think so.
How'd you get along with the merchant sailors?
Very good.
Was there ever any resentment that they were making more money than you were?
At first, but we found out that they were doing a job and we were doing our job. There were people that didn't get along with the merchant seamen, but all of our crews got along.
It never bothered you that they were making extra money for shipping out and they had the right to say they didn't want to go, or?
We had some resentment, but we volunteered for what we did, so we couldn't.
What about, did they ever assist you on the guns?
Oh, yes, yes. They helped us. They were very good at that.
Were there ever any occasions where merchant sailors would say, we're not going to do that, that's not our job?
No, not on our ships.
Mhm.
Maybe other ships, yes. But we had a good understanding with them.
Did you ever feel that it was unfair that you were under Navy discipline and they weren't?
No, because we weren't that disciplined. In the Armed Guard, we were regular guys, and we did our job, and they did their job. They helped us, and we helped them if we could, and that was it.
About how many sailors were on the John Brown?
We had anywhere from 20 to 40 Navy men, depending on what kind of a ship you were on, what the armament was, and the John Brown was a transport cargo ship. We transported troops, and we carried cargo. So we had more Navy men on there.
What was the highest ranking naval person aboard?
Probably a lieutenant. Mostly an ensign.
Mm-hmm. And when you went to see the John Brown in Buffalo, were your old guns still there?
Yes.
Did it come back to you how to operate the
yeah.
gun?
Yeah. I got a picture of it over there. We've got a club that there's Armed Guard from Rochester and merchant seamen, and we meet once a month over at the Country Buffet, and we shoot the bull and talk about old times, and there's 2 or 3 of us that were on the Brown that meet there.
And you meet with the merchant sailors?
Yeah. We have lunch, and get along very well with them.
So, now you were in the Pacific Theater also, weren't you?
I was in the Pacific,
Okay,
the Atlantic.
Any differences come to mind between sailing in the Pacific and the Atlantic?
Well, Atlantic was rough. Going up to Murmansk was snow and ice. Our guns froze. It was a rough trip.
Mhm.
Oh, they were all rough. We were all always under attack, always on alert.
Would you say it was stressful?
I don't think so. Like I say, we were young and probably didn't know the difference.
What did you do after the war?
After the war, got a job, worked,
Get married, settle down?
yeah, got married, 5 children, 52 years, very happy.
When you think back to your time in the Naval Armed Guard, what do you think of the most? What strikes you the most?
I think it was very interesting. Learned a lot, saw a lot of the world that I wouldn't have seen if it wasn't for the Navy. Never got hurt.
Do you think it changed your life at all?
I can't tell. I don't know what it would have been if we had the 4 years as civilians, but I wouldn't give that up for anything. It was the best part of my life.
Now, tell us about the medals you have here.
Well, I've got the regular ones here,
You want to hold them up and show us?
and then I got the Philippine Liberation Medal that I'm proud of. I got two medals from the Russian government that was sent to us 50 years after the war, thanking us for what we did helping the Russians, bringing supplies over, which was nice. And the rest of them are just the ordinary good conduct and Asiatic Pacific, European theater.
Now, what's this one?
That's the good conduct medal. I guess everybody got that.
And you know which Russian medal is which?
Yeah, well, they're probably both, one's for the 50th anniversary of the Russian something or other, and I got a paper that explains them, but there's one that's in Russian. Got my name up there in Russian, and it's something different.
Good. Well, any last thoughts? Anything else you'd like to add?
I don't know.
Anything you'd like to tell people who might be viewing this in the future? Things you learned that you'd like to pass on?
Well, I'm proud for what I did in the service. And I think any man or female should have some service time for their country. You appreciate your country more if you served in it or did something for it, I think.
Good. Well, thank you very much.
It's kind of hard to, I don't know what it would have been in the Army. They were probably under the same system. But,
I guess it must have been a little difficult at times, being so cramped.
we had a tough time.
How'd you make it work? How did you make it all work?
Well, day to day. It was the life we chose at that time, and I enjoyed it. I wouldn't have traded it for anything.
What did you enjoy the most about it?
Traveling, seeing the different ports, different people. Now I see the change in these countries 60 years after we saw them. They're all built up. Take that Basra in the Persian Gulf. It was nothing when we were there. One incident over in the Persian Gulf, a man came up to me and asked me if he could go aboard and get a drink of water. I said, sure. So we got talking, and he worked for the Anglo-American Oil Company. And I asked him what his name was, where he was from. He was from, I said, I'm from East Rochester. He said, well, so am I. And I asked him what his name was. He told me. And I said, you got a daughter? I can't think of her name right now. And he says, yeah. And I said, I went to school with her. I graduated with her. He'd left home, and she thought he had died, but he skipped out on his family and went over there to work. But, you know, being from the same town and that far away was a coincidence.
Did you ever tell his daughter you'd seen him?
Yeah, but she says my father was dead. She didn't want to know about him.
Must have been interesting for him to
Yeah.
meet somebody from East Rochester.
Yeah.
So you never went back to the sea? You came home and...
No. I didn't even care about riding in the boat. I mean, not, I would, but I never cared about going back.
Well, thanks again.
Okay?